In this engaging episode of the Ben Shapiro Show, host Ben Shapiro unpacks the controversies surrounding President Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden, scrutinizing serious allegations of political corruption. The core narrative revolves around the scrutiny over Hunter Biden's business ventures, which critics allege were explicitly influenced by his father's position as vice president under the Obama administration. Shapiro alleges that many crucial details about the connection between the Bidens and Hunter's business have been glossed over. This includes the notable example of Hunter Biden's sudden appointment to the board of the Ukrainian energy company Burisma, with critics hypothesizing that this directly coincided with Joe Biden's control over U.S. foreign policy towards Ukraine. This alleged conflict of interest was even a central factor in Donald Trump's first impeachment procedures. Moreover, Shapiro emphasizes how a text message from Hunter to his daughter discussed contributing to the family's finances and hinted at Joe Biden's involvement in the financial decisions. The host insinuates that this message attests to the possibility of financial flows from foreign sources to Hunter and then to Joe. Shapiro then delves into a detailed timeline that covers Hunter Biden's business pursuits alongside the related actions of Joe Biden. This timeline scrutinizes, among other instances, business deals in China, Joe Biden's official trips coinciding with his son's business activities, and allegations of preferential treatment for Burisma during Joe Biden's tenure as vice president. Towards the end of this analysis, Shapiro argues that the Bidens' alleged wrongdoings parallel widely known mafia activities. A mob boss, he claims, maintains plausible deniability while directing his subordinates to carry out the dirty work, which could correlate to Joe Biden's public insistence that he was unaware of Hunter's activities. Through careful scrutiny and analysis, Shapiro paints a picture of alleged corruption, negligence, and financial impropriety within the Biden family that he suggests may lead to impeachment inquiries in the future. In the next section of Ben Shapiro's show, he critically analyzes the alleged involvement of former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden in questionable business dealings overseas. Ben Shapiro extracted certain pieces of the transcripts to reinforce his main points and arguments. The first situation he examined relates to the Durban Accords, an initiative by the BRICS nations, Brazil, India, Russia, China, South Africa, to establish a new international currency backed by gold and other commodities. Shapiro takes this as a potential threat to the dollar and stresses the importance of diversification of assets for financial stability, recommending gold as a reliable alternative. The show then dives into the timelines and transactions associated with the Bidens, tracing meetings and financial flows between Hunter Biden, Burisma, a Kazakhstani oil company, and a Chinese firm, BHR, suggesting an intricate network of business transactions and political influence. Shapiro highlighted April 23, 2014, when $142,300 was wired from a Singaporean company associated with a Kazakhstani businessman to Hunter Biden via a Rosemont Seneca entity for the purchase of a sports car. The Chinese firm BHR invested $1.7 billion in a chemical company linked to the Chinese Communist Party around the same time. And later, Hunter Biden invested nearly $500,000 in BHR. By the end of 2014, these companies announced a joint financial arrangement. In 2015, when Joe Biden's alleged involvement becomes more tangible, Hunter Biden reportedly organized a business dinner at Cafe Milano in Washington, D.C. Vice President Biden briefly stopped by the meeting to meet with a high-level Burisma official, Vadim Pojarsky. In the same year, records show payments made by Burisma officials to the Biden family, with allegations that this was to obtain Joe Biden's support for Burisma. This was substantiated by Senator Chuck Grassley's document release that reported discussions of monetary exchanges. From 2015 to 2017, large sums of money were reportedly wired from various entities associated with China and Ukraine to accounts linked to the Biden family. Shapiro also discusses Joe Biden's attendance at a CEFC meeting in 2017, which contradicts Biden's claim of no involvement in the dealings with Hunter. The excerpt ends with a focus on a WhatsApp message from Hunter Biden to a Chinese company where he allegedly seeks to leverage his father's influence to fulfill undisclosed partnership commitments. Ben Shapiro also discusses the allegations of corruption involving Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and his business dealings in the U.S. and abroad. Shapiro references a timeline that begins in 2017, in which Hunter Biden requested keys for his office that he shared with Chinese business partners, and ends in 2019 when he intended to resign from the BHR board of directors. Shapiro presents Biden's statement that Hunter had no equity in BHR while he served as vice president and earned no compensation serving on its board. To counter this, Shapiro cites a series of funds and investment groups linked to Hunter Biden, amounting to over $17.3 million from 2014 to 2019. Shapiro then questions the IRS's apparent lack of action when Hunter Biden allegedly did not pay taxes on much of this income. One of the IRS whistleblowers testified to the $17.3 million in foreign income streams through various shell companies to Hunter Biden and his associates. Shapiro enumerates some of the funds involved and highlights a text from Hunter to his daughter in 2019, implying that he has been financially supporting the entire family for 30 years. Shapiro expresses cynicism as to whether Joe Biden was completely unaware of these apparent business dealings. He discusses Joe Biden's potential involvement in Ukraine policy based on these dealings, stating that it is a form of bribery. He criticizes the morphing narrative from the White House press secretary, stating that it is clear that Joe Biden is not telling the truth about these dealings. The conversation shifts to Hunter Biden's recent foray into art. Shapiro mentions that some of the purchasers of Hunter Biden's art are individuals with connections to the political sphere, fueling suspicion of money laundering or corruption. He criticizes the lack of transparency and scrutiny from the media regarding these allegations against the Biden family. Shapiro concludes his segment by suggesting that Republicans are gaining momentum in the face of Biden's alleged corruption and questionable mental fitness. He predicts that Kamala Harris will become the Democratic Party's new figurehead, but critiques her effectiveness as a leader. He contends that the best campaign against Biden is his record itself. In next portion, Ben Shapiro discusses the forthcoming Republican debates and the recent attacks on potential candidate Ron DeSantis by the media. Shapiro argues that the media serves two purposes: to ensure Donald Trump becomes the candidate and to damage the reputation of other potential candidates. Shapiro criticizes the media for their recent attacks on candidate Ron DeSantis, stating that the media claims about DeSantis promoting an anti-black curriculum in Florida are false. Shapiro explains the contents of the curriculum, countering the media's portrayal, and how it's being manipulated to cast DeSantis as a racist. He also highlights how the media targets candidates who are not in line with their preferred narrative, while boosting those who are. The debate surrounding the forthcoming Republican debates is also discussed. Shapiro explains that Donald Trump has chosen not to participate, as he is the frontrunner, which raises the question of whether these debates are more about Trump or any other candidate. Shapiro further examines media bias by pointing out the double standards in the coverage of political figures. He uses examples such as how the media treats allegations about Trump differently from allegations against DeSantis. He also calls out the media for telling several untruths to damage a candidate's reputation. Shapiro also discusses developments in Israeli politics, discussing an amendment to Israel's basic law preventing the Supreme Court from overturning executive or administrative actions based on reasonableness. This new amendment has drawn protests and criticism, but Shapiro argues that it was needed to prevent unelected officials from dictating policy to elected governments. He criticizes the Biden White House for commenting on Israeli politics, saying that this is an unusual step for the U.S. to take with its allies. Shapiro finishes this part of the podcast by analyzing how politicians and the media can exacerbate societal divisions for their benefit. He uses the example of a proposed law in Israel that would have exempted ultra-Orthodox Jews from military service. He concludes by discussing how politicians use these issues to gain support by creating an atmosphere of crisis and conflict. In the last part of the Ben Shapiro Show, two core topics are discussed: perceived media exaggeration of political dichotomies and a film review of the latest Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Shapiro begins by discussing the current political landscape in Israel, focusing on the fears of growing theocracy, reiterating that Likud, the leading party in the majority in a coalition with UTJ, has clearly stated that this is not on the table and will not be advanced. Shapiro comments that the media tends to exaggerate differences to incite discontent, a phenomenon that he also sees in the U.S. He criticizes the dramatic depiction of elections as pivotal and consequential when, in Western democracies, language that people should never use is "this is the end of the country," like the end of the country, because guess what? It almost certainly is not. He acknowledged that despite media drama, political shifts are instrumental in democracies and can be easily overturned, even by institutions like the Supreme Court. Switching gears, Shapiro moves on to reviewing the film, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, judging by his barometer for good films. A score of 60, 85 on Rotten Tomatoes. According to him, the movie did not perform as expected at the box office, perhaps due to outdated IP. But he finds it delightful and quite wonderful. He appreciates the technology used in the movie for de-aging Harrison Ford's character and the narrative that explores Indiana Jones as a man out of time. Shapiro thinks the movie cleverly discusses themes around an aging character adjusting to a rapidly changing world, and it's the character's inspiring journey that makes the film great. He particularly lauds a plot twist at the end of the movie, and despite it being slightly lengthy, Shapiro highly recommends the film. Finally, Shapiro closes the segment with an invite to Brett Cooper for the next part of the show, where they will be discussing Barbie. He thanks everyone for tuning in before ending the segment. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.